heard enough of you. You are worthless to me. Get her out of here.
Don't cry. You...
No, please don't do this to me. I have to.
Hey, it's gonna be okay.
The rough hand around Amelia's wrist tightened as she tried to pull away. "Please, don't do this," she whispered, her voice breaking before the words were fully formed. The front door slammed behind her. Standing in the yard was a ragged-looking man whose coat was patched so many times that its original color had disappeared. His boots looked ready to fall apart. A faded backpack rested beside him, and his tired eyes carried the weight of someone who had lost everything. Martha, Amelia's stepmother, shoved her forward so hard she nearly fell into him. "You paid $180, Martha snapped. "Take her. She's your problem now." The man stared at Amelia with quiet confusion. "Ma'am, I don't understand." "You don't have to. Take your money and take her too. I will not have her in this house anymore. Consider it part of the deal." Amelia's heart sank. She had spent years believing she meant very little in that house. But hearing herself spoken about like an unwanted piece of furniture hurt in a way she never imagined. But what Martha did not know was what was about to be her downfall. If you enjoy emotional stories filled with unforgettable twists and heartfelt endings, take a moment to subscribe. Give this video a like and let everyone know where you're watching from in the comments. It's always amazing seeing people join us from all across the world. The alarm on Amelia's old phone buzzed at 5 a.m. She silenced it before the second vibration. The house was still asleep. For a brief moment, she remained sitting on the edge of her bed, listening. Silence. It was the only part of the day that truly belonged to her. She closed her eyes for just one more breath before slipping on a faded sweater and quietly making her way downstairs. By the time the coffee finished brewing, bacon was sizzling in the pan, eggs were nearly done, toast was warming, and 3 lunchboxes sat open across the kitchen counter. Amelia moved quickly, almost automatically. She had done this so many mornings that her hands no longer needed instructions. The back door opened. Martha walked in, tying the belt of her robe. Without so much as a "good morning," she glanced around the kitchen. "The coffee smells weak." "I'm sorry. I'll make another pot." Martha picked up a piece of toast. "It's cold." "I'll make fresh." "I didn't ask for excuses." Amelia quietly nodded. "Yes, ma'am." A few minutes later, footsteps echoed from upstairs. Vanessa walked into the kitchen without looking up from her phone. "My blue blouse." Amelia looked over. "What about it?" "I need it. I ironed it last night." Vanessa frowned. "Then why is it still hanging in the laundry room instead of my closet?" "I'm sorry, I must have forgotten." Vanessa sighed dramatically. "I swear, if I had to do everything myself around here." She walked away before finishing the sentence. Amelia placed another slice of bread into the toaster. Chloe entered next. She grabbed a banana from the fruit bowl, walked past Amelia, and headed toward the front door. "Your lunch." Amelia held out the lunchbox she had packed. Chloe turned around, took it without saying thank you, and left. The front door closed. That was it. No smile, no complaint, no acknowledgement. She simply didn't care enough to notice Amelia one way or the other. Martha sat down at the dining table and unfolded a grocery list. "When breakfast is cleaned up, I need you to stop by Miller's Pharmacy." "Yes." "Then the grocery store." "Okay. And don't forget to pick up Vanessa's dress from the cleaners." "I won't." Martha looked around the kitchen. "The trash is still by the back door. I was going to take it out after the dishes." "I shouldn't have to point these things out. I'm sorry. You seem to say that a lot." Amelia lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry." Martha simply stood, collected her purse, and walked toward the door. "And don't waste time." The house became quiet again. Amelia looked at the untouched breakfast she had prepared. Everyone had eaten. She hadn't. She gathered the cold eggs from the pan, placed them onto a small plate, and sat alone at the corner of the table. 3 bites. That was all she managed before remembering the dishes. She quietly pushed the plate aside. There would be time later. There always had to be time later. By noon, Amelia had crossed half the town on foot. The pharmacy, the cleaners, the bakery, the grocery store. Her reusable shopping bags dug into her fingers as she stepped into the checkout line. "Amelia?" she turned. Mrs. Dawson smiled warmly from the next register. "There you are." Amelia's tired face brightened. Mrs. Dawson. The older woman finished paying for her groceries before walking over. She studied Amelia for only a second. My goodness. What? You look exhausted. Amelia laughed softly. I'm all right. Mrs. Dawson tilted her head. Have you had any sleep lately? I've just been busy. There was no judgment in the sound, only concern. Mrs. Dawson gently touched Amelia's arm. I'll be at the library this evening. I know. I just finished unpacking a box of donated novels. Amelia smiled. Anything good? I saved one that I think you'll enjoy. You always know exactly what I like. I've had plenty of practice. For the first time that day, Amelia laughed. A real laugh. Mrs. Dawson smiled with quiet satisfaction. Come by after your errands. I'll try. No, the older woman corrected herself gently. I hope you do. Amelia nodded. I'll be there. As they separated, Mrs. Dawson watched her disappear beneath the weight of the grocery bags. Something about the young woman's smile always seemed to disappear a little too quickly. Amelia had barely stepped through the front door when Martha's voice echoed from the living room. What took you so long? The checkout line was crowded. You should have left earlier. I came straight home. Martha took one look at the bags. The ice cream's probably melting. I hurried. You clearly didn't hurry enough. Vanessa walked downstairs. My dress? Amelia handed it over. Vanessa inspected the garment bag. They pressed it wrong. I just picked it up. So good at nothing, she said quietly as she walked away. Go ahead and start preparing for dinner. Martha sighed. Yes, ma'am. For the next several hours, Amelia barely sat down. Laundry, sweeping, cooking, cleaning. By the time dinner ended, everyone else moved into the living room. Amelia remained behind, washing dishes in silence. The laughter from the television drifted in from the next room. Nobody asked if she wanted to watch. Nobody noticed she wasn't there. When the last plate was finally dry, she removed her apron. I'm going to the library for a little while. Martha didn't even look away from the television. You already mentioned it. I'll be back before closing. A dismissive wave of the hand. Amelia quietly left. The library felt like stepping into another world. The air smelled of old pages and polished wood. People whispered instead of shouted. No one demanded anything from her. Mrs. Dawson looked up from behind the front desk. I was beginning to think I'd have to read this one myself. She held up a novel with a smile. Amelia laughed. I wouldn't let that happen. You say that every time. And every time I'm right. Mrs. Dawson poured 2 cups of tea. You have 10 minutes? I can stay a little. A little is enough. They sat near the window as evening sunlight stretched across rows of books. For a while they talked about nothing important. A mystery novel. A little boy who had proudly finished his first chapter book. A cat that had somehow wandered into the history section that morning. Ordinary things. Beautifully ordinary. Mrs. Dawson noticed Amelia smiling. There you are. I've been looking for that smile all day. Amelia looked down at her tea. I like it here. I know. Sometimes she thought. The library felt less like a building, and more like borrowing peace for an hour. When the clock neared closing time, Amelia reluctantly stood. I should go. Mrs. Dawson nodded. I'll see you Thursday? If I can. The older woman smiled gently. The chair by the window will be waiting. Amelia thanked her and stepped back into the cool evening air. She walked home more slowly than usual. Not because she was tired, because home was waiting. She passed families eating dinner together on their porches. Children raced bicycles beneath the fading sunset. Neighbors laughed over backyard fences. She found herself slowing her pace again. Just another minute, one more block, one more deep breath before opening that front door. The library never asked anything from her. The house always did. She wasn't walking toward rest. She was walking back to work. Sometimes she wondered if anyone inside that house even noticed she had dreams of her own. Or if they only noticed when something hadn't been cleaned. She tightened her grip on the borrowed novel. Books reminded her there were kinder worlds than the one she returned to every night. As she turned onto her street, she noticed a man standing near Martha's front lawn. His coat was worn. His boots had seen better days. A lawnmower sat beside the sidewalk. He held a folded invoice in one hand. For just a second, their eyes met. He offered a polite smile. She returned one before quietly walking past him. Neither spoke. Amelia climbed the porch steps and opened the front door. She had barely stepped inside. There you are. Martha's sharp voice cut through the house. I just got back. What time do you call this? I was at the library. You said that before you left. Yes. And are you supposed to spend the whole evening there? I only stayed a little while. Martha stood. The kitchen floor hasn't been swept. I'm sorry. I'll do that right now. You disappear whenever you feel like it and then expect the house to wait for you. I didn't mean... No. Martha's voice turned cold. I've had enough. She grabbed Amelia by the wrist. Martha, come with me. I'm sorry. You're always sorry. She dragged Amelia toward the front door. Martha, please. Vanessa looked up from the couch but didn't move. Chloe kept watching the television. Neither sister followed. Neither sister stopped her. The front door flew open. Daniel turned around at the sound. Martha shoved Amelia onto the porch so hard she stumbled. Daniel instinctively stepped forward. Ma'am? Martha reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a folded stack of bills, and shoved them toward him. There's your $180. Daniel looked confused. I appreciate it. He accepted the money. Thank you. Now take her. He blinked. I'm sorry? The girl. She pushed Amelia another step toward him. Take her. Daniel looked from Martha to Amelia. Then back again. I don't understand. You wanted your pay. I worked for my pay. You've got it. She folded her arms. So now you can take her with you. Daniel frowned. Ma'am. His voice remained calm. I was hired to cut your lawn. I know. I wasn't hired to. He looked at Amelia before finishing the sentence. Take someone from their home. Martha laughed bitterly. Home? She looked at Amelia. Does this look like her home? Daniel remained quiet. Martha pointed toward the street. I don't care where she goes, but she isn't spending another night under my roof. Amelia stared at the porch beneath her feet. She wasn't crying. Not anymore. Some hurts became too familiar for tears. Daniel looked at Martha. You can't just throw her out. I just did. She has nowhere to go. That sounds like her problem. Martha stepped backward into the doorway. You seem like a decent man. If you want to help her, help her. If you don't, she shrugged. Walk away. But don't bring her back. She slammed the front door. Silence settled over the yard. Daniel stood there for several seconds staring at the closed door. Finally, he looked at Amelia. I'm sorry. She gave a small shake of her head. You don't have to apologize. I should have said something sooner. There wasn't anything you could have said. He looked down at the money still in his hand. Then he quietly folded it and slipped it into his pocket. Have you eaten dinner? She hesitated. No. He nodded once. I know a place where people share whatever they have. She looked at the dark street ahead. Then back at the house. No lights came on. No one opened the door. No one called her name. There was nothing left for her there. Daniel adjusted the old backpack on his shoulder. I'm heading that way. He didn't hold out his hand. He didn't pressure her. He simply waited. After a long moment, Amelia took one last look at the place she had spent years trying to call home. Then she quietly walked beside him. Neither of them spoke much during the journey. Nearly an hour later, the lights of the neighborhood had faded behind them. An abandoned church stood at the edge of town where a small fire flickered beneath the night sky. Several familiar faces looked up as Daniel approached. An elderly woman smiled warmly. You're back. Daniel nodded. I brought someone who needs supper. Without asking questions, the group made room. One man split his last potato. Another offered coffee. Someone else found Amelia an old blanket. She couldn't understand it. These people owned almost nothing, yet they shared everything. If Daniel's kindness has already touched your heart, leave it in the comments and don't forget to like this video. And subscribe to it, really helps a lot. Back at Martha's house. Vanessa frowned. Mom, what if she tells someone? Martha scoffed. Who's going to believe a girl with nowhere to live? Chloe looked uncertain. What if that homeless guy comes back? He won't. Martha smirked. People like him disappear every day. None of them noticed the black SUV parked half a block away. Inside sat a gray-haired driver watching the house through tinted windows. He spoke quietly into a phone. I've located Mr. Blackwood. A pause. Yes, another pause. He refuses to return. The driver's expression grew serious. But there's something else. He glanced toward the abandoned church where Daniel and Amelia had disappeared into the night. He's no longer alone. Far across town, Daniel quietly placed another log onto the fire. The flames danced across his face. Amelia noticed something strange. For a man who supposedly had nothing, His hands carried old scars that looked less like hardship and more like years of protecting others. She wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. "Why were you willing to take me away from that house?" Daniel stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. "Because." His voice became almost painfully quiet. "Once, few years ago, someone failed to save my daughter." Amelia froze. The fire cracked between them, and hidden inside Daniel's backpack, her eyes caught the corner of a leather folder. Stamped in faded gold letters were words that made no sense for a homeless man to possess. Blackwood International. She looked up at him again. He quickly closed the bag, but it was already too late. She had seen it. And for the first time since leaving Martha's house, Amelia realized the man everyone believed was worthless might be hiding a life-changing secret. The fire settled into glowing embers, but Amelia's thoughts refused to quiet. She wasn't trying to invade Daniel's privacy. She simply couldn't understand what she had seen. Blackwood International. The name lingered in her mind. It sounded important, too important to belong inside the worn backpack of a man who slept beneath a broken church roof. Daniel noticed her staring. "You should get some rest," she hesitated. "May I ask you something?" "You may." That folder. For the first time since she'd met him, something unreadable crossed his face. "It belongs to an old life. Was it your job?" He gave the smallest smile. "Something like that." He didn't say another word. It wasn't the answer she wanted, but somehow it wasn't a lie either. She nodded and let the subject go. People who had suffered usually carried stories they weren't ready to tell. She understood that better than anyone. Morning arrived with birdsong filtering through shattered stained glass windows. Amelia woke to the smell of fresh coffee. She blinked in surprise. "Coffee?" Daniel stood outside beside a small camping stove. "I found some work unloading a delivery truck before sunrise." He handed her a paper cup and breakfast. It wasn't much, 2 warm biscuits wrapped in paper. But to Amelia it felt like a feast. "You worked already?" He shrugged. "Sleeping doesn't solve today's problems." She smiled for what felt like the first genuine time in years. "You always talk like that?" "Like what?" "As if every sentence belongs in a book." A quiet chuckle escaped him. "I've read too many." She laughed. It caught both of them off guard. The sound echoed through the old church light and unexpected. Daniel looked away, almost embarrassed. "I haven't heard laughter around me in a long time." Neither had she. Over the next several days, an unusual routine formed. Daniel accepted odd jobs wherever he could find them. Moving furniture, fixing broken fences, repairing old roofs. Unlike the other workers, he never argued about pay. If someone could only afford half, he accepted half. If they couldn't pay at all, he often helped anyway. Amelia watched him carefully. He wasn't pretending to be kind. Nobody was watching. There was nothing to gain. He simply couldn't ignore people who needed help. One afternoon, after repairing an elderly widow's porch, the woman pressed an extra $50 into his hand. "You earned this." Daniel shook his head. The agreed price was $20. "I know." "Then 20 is enough." The woman insisted. "So buy your wife something nice." Daniel glanced toward Amelia, who was sweeping sawdust from the porch. His eyes softened. "We're not married." The widow smiled knowingly. "Not yet." Amelia nearly dropped the broom. Heat rushed into her cheeks. Daniel simply smiled without correcting the woman further. For reasons she couldn't explain, that tiny silence stayed with her all afternoon. Across town, Martha sat at her dining table flipping through unpaid bills. Vanessa slammed her phone onto the table. "People are talking." "About what?" "Amelia." Martha rolled her eyes. "What now?" "Someone saw her." "Good. With that homeless man." "So?" Vanessa leaned closer. They looked. She searched for the word, happy. Martha's expression hardened. "Impossible." Chloe entered carrying groceries. "I heard something too." "What?" "The church group says he's different." "Different how?" "No one knows. They say he disappears for hours." "So?" "And sometimes expensive cars are seen nearby." Martha laughed loudly. "Expensive cars? They're probably dropping off charity." But despite her laughter, a tiny seed of unease settled inside her. That evening, rain poured over the city. Daniel and Amelia took shelter beneath an old bus station. Several homeless families huddled nearby, trying to stay dry. A little boy shivered violently beside his exhausted mother. Without thinking, Amelia removed the only dry blanket she owned and wrapped it around him. His mother protested. "You need it too." "I'm warm enough." She wasn't. Daniel knew it. He quietly removed his own coat and draped it over Amelia's shoulders. What about you? I've survived colder nights. Their eyes met. No dramatic words were spoken. None were needed. Sometimes love didn't begin with grand confessions. Sometimes it began with someone silently making sure another person wasn't cold. Later that night, Daniel walked away while everyone slept. He checked the time. Exactly midnight. A black SUV rolled silently into the empty parking lot. The same gray-haired driver stepped out. Sir. Daniel sighed. I told you not to come. The board is demanding your return. I resigned. They never accepted it. I don't care. They're preparing legal action. Daniel looked toward the bus station where Amelia slept. I said no. The driver lowered his voice. They've frozen several company decisions because your signature is required. Daniel remained silent. There are over 40,000 employees waiting. His jaw tightened. I know, and your cousin is trying to take control. Still, silence. The driver handed him a sealed envelope. Please read this. Daniel accepted it reluctantly. What about the young woman? Daniel looked back toward the sleeping figures. She has nowhere else. The driver nodded. I'll arrange somewhere safe. No, sir. I said no. The driver's eyes widened slightly. He had worked for Daniel for many years. Never, not once, had he heard that protective tone before. The next morning, Daniel returned before Amelia woke. The envelope remained unopened inside his backpack. She noticed he looked tired. Were you working again? You could say that. You don't have to carry everything alone. He looked at her for a long moment. If I don't? His voice became distant. Other people pay the price. She didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. Mrs. Dawson from the library found them later that afternoon. I've been looking everywhere. Amelia hugged the elderly woman tightly. Mrs. Dawson held her face gently. Oh, my dear child. Her eyes filled with tears after seeing Amelia's thin frame. I should have realized something was wrong. It wasn't your fault. Mrs. Dawson reached into her purse. I brought sandwiches. Daniel smiled. Thank you. She studied him carefully. So you're Daniel. I am. The man who refused to let Amelia face the streets alone. He looked uncomfortable. I only did what anyone should. Mrs. Dawson smiled sadly. No. She glanced around. Not everyone would. Before leaving, she slipped a folded note into Daniel's hand without Amelia noticing. Read it later. He nodded. That evening, Amelia wandered into the abandoned church's old storage room looking for candles. Instead, she found Daniel sitting alone. His shoulders trembled. In his hands was an old photograph. He didn't hear her approach. The picture showed a smiling little girl with bright eyes standing between Daniel and a beautiful woman. A family. Tung. Happy. Gone. A tear rolled down Daniel's cheek. Very slowly, he whispered words meant for no one else. I'm sorry I couldn't save either of you. Amelia quietly stepped backward. She had never seen grief look so lonely. She left without disturbing him. Some wounds deserved silence instead of questions. The following afternoon, everything changed. Daniel and Amelia were walking through the town square after finishing another day's work when 3 expensive black vehicles pulled up beside the sidewalk. People stopped walking. Business owners looked outside. Doors opened. Men in tailored suits stepped out one after another. Their polished shoes contrasted sharply with Daniel's worn boots. The oldest among them approached respectfully. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he bowed. Mr. Blackwood. Daniel closed his eyes. Not here, not now. The man continued. The emergency board meeting can no longer proceed without you. Every conversation in the square stopped. Amelia stared at Daniel. The name echoed in her ears. Blackwood, the folder, the mysterious driver, the expensive cars. None of it had been an accident. One of the suited men looked toward Amelia with visible curiosity before quietly asking, Sir, is this? He hesitated. The woman you've chosen to protect. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for Amelia's trembling hand, and before the entire town, he gently held it. Then he spoke words that left every witness speechless. No. A painful silence fell between them. Amelia felt her heart sink, but before disappointment could settle, Daniel finished his sentence. She's the woman who has been protecting me. She's the reason I remembered how to live again. And in that single moment, every person watching realized they had judged the ragged man far too quickly. Yet none of them, not even Amelia, were prepared for the truth that would emerge when Daniel finally agreed to return to Blackwood International. That truth wouldn't just change their future. It would expose why one of the richest men in America had willingly disappeared, and why powerful people were desperate to make sure he never reclaimed what was his. The silence in the town square seemed to stretch forever. No one moved. No one even whispered. The executives stood with their heads slightly lowered, waiting for Daniel to speak, as though his next sentence would decide the fate of thousands. Amelia slowly looked from the expensive vehicles to Daniel's worn coat. Nothing fit together. Not the patched backpack. Not the calloused hands. Not the respectful way these powerful men addressed someone everyone else had ignored. Daniel released her hand gently. "I told you I wasn't coming back." The oldest executive cleared his throat. "Sir, circumstances have changed. They always do. Your nephew has called another emergency vote." Daniel's expression hardened. "I resigned. You stepped away. I disappeared. You disappeared because you were grieving." A shadow crossed Daniel's face. "Don't speak for me, Harold." The older man immediately lowered his eyes. "My apologies." Another executive stepped forward, younger and far less patient. "With respect, sir, this is no longer just your decision." Daniel looked at him without saying a word. The younger man continued. "Investors are threatening lawsuits. Contracts are being canceled. Thousands of employees are frightened. Blackwood International has survived many storms, but it may not survive this one." Daniel remained silent. Finally, Harold spoke again. "Please, just come to the meeting. 1 hour. If you still wish to leave afterward, no one will stop you." Daniel glanced at Amelia. She could see the battle in his eyes. It wasn't a battle between wealth and poverty. It was a battle between a painful past and responsibilities he had never stopped carrying. "You should go," she said softly. "I don't want to leave you. I'll be fine." "I don't know how long it will take." She smiled gently. "You've spent every day making sure I wasn't alone. It's my turn." For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel nodded. 1 hour. Relief washed across Harold's face. "We'll return you immediately afterward." Daniel turned toward Amelia. Mrs. Dawson had arrived only moments earlier, having witnessed everything from across the street. "Would you stay with her?" The elderly librarian smiled warmly. "Of course." Daniel looked at Amelia one last time. "I'll come back." She believed him. She didn't know why. She simply did. As the convoy disappeared down the road, Mrs. Dawson slipped her arm through Amelia's. "You have questions." 1,000. The older woman chuckled softly. "So do I." They walked toward the library in thoughtful silence. Finally, Amelia asked the question she couldn't keep inside any longer. "Do you think he lied to me?" Mrs. Dawson stopped walking. "No, but he never told me who he really was." "Sometimes," she replied gently, "people hide because they're ashamed. Daniel doesn't seem ashamed." "No." She smiled sadly. "He seems heartbroken." Those words settled deep inside Amelia's chest. Heartbroken, not dishonest. There was a difference. Meanwhile, the convoy entered downtown. Towering glass buildings reflected the afternoon sun. Employees gathered near the entrance of Blackwood International's headquarters. Whispers spread through the crowd. "It can't be him. Is that Mr. Blackwood?" Daniel stepped out wearing the same worn clothes. No tailored suit, no polished shoes, just the patched coat he'd worn for months. The security guards immediately straightened. One opened the doors without being asked. Inside, hundreds of employees watched in stunned silence. Some had worked there many years. Others had never met the legendary founder. But every one of them recognized the face from company portraits hanging throughout the building. The portraits showed a smiling businessman in expensive suits. The man standing before them looked older, thinner. His eyes carried sorrow that hadn't existed in those photographs. Yet somehow, he looked more real than ever. One woman quietly began to cry. Another started clapping, then another. Within seconds, the entire lobby erupted into applause. Daniel looked uncomfortable. "Please." The applause slowly faded. "I don't deserve this." An older janitor stepped forward. "Yes, you do." Daniel frowned. The man smiled. "Years ago, my wife got cancer." Recognition flickered across Daniel's face. "You paid every hospital bill." "I don't remember." "I do." The janitor's voice shook. "You never told anyone." Daniel lowered his eyes. "I was only helping." "You saved my family." Another employee spoke. "You paid for my daughter's medical school." "I heard you covered funeral expenses for employees." "My daughter received one of your scholarships." One by one, voices filled the lobby. Stories, Acts of kindness, quiet generosity, none of them had made headlines. Daniel had never wanted them to. Harold leaned close. This is why they never stopped believing you'd come back. Daniel swallowed hard. His grief had made him forget something. He hadn't only built a company, he had built a family. The boardroom doors opened. Inside sat 12 directors. At the far end of the polished table lounged Victor Blackwood, Daniel's cousin. His smile never reached his eyes. Danny, Daniel remained standing. Victor, I wasn't sure you'd remember where your office was. I remember enough. Victor gestured toward the empty chair. Please. Daniel didn't sit. You called the meeting. Victor folded his hands calmly. Yes, the company needs leadership. It has one. You abandoned it. A heavy silence followed. Daniel finally spoke. My wife and daughter died. Victor shrugged, and the world kept turning. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Daniel stared at him. For the first time, there wasn't sadness in his eyes, only disappointment. I hoped time had made you kinder. Victor smiled thinly. It made me realistic. He slid several documents across the table. I've prepared everything. What is it? A permanent transfer of executive authority. Harold immediately stood. This is outrageous. Victor ignored him. Sign the papers. Daniel didn't even glance at them. No. Victor's smile faded. You haven't read them. I don't need to. You always were sentimental, and you always confused greed with strength. The room became painfully quiet. Victor leaned forward. You think those people downstairs love you? Daniel said nothing. They love your money. No. They'll forget you. No. Victor laughed. They already have. Daniel finally met his gaze. If that were true, he looked toward the lobby below. They wouldn't have remembered kindness I never spoke about. Victor's jaw tightened. Hours later, Daniel left the building. He had refused every luxury offered to him. The limousine, the penthouse, the private security, everything. I said 1 hour. Harold sighed. You really are going back? Yes, to the church, to Amelia. Harold smiled faintly. I've never seen you hurry home before. Daniel looked out the window. Neither had he. Back at the library, Amelia was shelving books when the front door burst open. Vanessa walked inside wearing oversized sunglasses. Chloe followed behind. Mrs. Dawson immediately stepped between them and Amelia. What do you want? Vanessa smiled sweetly. We're here to bring our sister home. Amelia almost laughed. You sold me. It was a misunderstanding. No. Martha entered behind them. This family belongs together. Amelia stared at her. You've never treated me like family. Martha lowered her voice. I forgive you. Mrs. Dawson's eyes widened. Forgive her? Martha ignored her. Come home. Amelia slowly shook her head. I already know what home feels like. For a split second, something dark flashed across Martha's face before the fake smile returned. You're making a terrible mistake. No. Amelia answered quietly. I finally stopped making one. The three women turned and walked away. But outside? Martha's pleasant expression disappeared completely. She looked at her daughters. So it's true. Vanessa frowned. What is? The homeless man. Her eyes narrowed with growing realization. He's Daniel Blackwood. Chloe gasped. The billionaire? Martha's face became pale. Then almost instantly it twisted into calculation. If Amelia stays close to him, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Vanessa understood immediately. What do we do? Martha looked back toward the library window where Amelia was smiling while helping a little boy choose his first book. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Martha's face. We make sure. Daniel believes Amelia has been lying to him from the very beginning, and miles away, completely unaware of the trap already being set. Daniel walked back toward the old church carrying something hidden inside a small velvet box. Daniel reached the abandoned church just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the broken stained glass windows with warm shades of gold and crimson. He paused outside. Laughter drifted through the open doorway, not loud laughter, gentle laughter. Amelia was teaching the little boy from the bus station how to read. The boy frowned in concentration. Tat. That's right. His face lit up. I did it. You did. Daniel remained where he was watching unnoticed. For months after losing his wife and daughter, he had believed joy was something that belonged to other people. Now, somehow, simply watching Amelia's smile made the world feel a little less empty. The velvet box in his coat pocket suddenly felt heavier. He quietly slipped it back inside. Not yet. Some moments deserved patience. Mrs. Dawson looked up first. Well, she smiled knowingly. Someone's back. The little boy ran toward Daniel. "Mr. Daniel?" Daniel crouched instinctively, catching him before he tripped. "Easy there. You came back. I said I would." The child nodded with complete confidence. "I knew." Amelia watched the exchange with a warmth she hadn't realized was spreading across her own heart. Promises. Daniel didn't make many, but every one he made, he kept. Later that evening, after everyone else had fallen asleep, Amelia and Daniel sat on the church steps beneath a sky filled with stars. Neither spoke for several minutes. It wasn't uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. Finally, Amelia broke the silence. "So," he smiled. "So, you really are Daniel Blackwood." "I am. The billionaire, I suppose. You say that like it isn't important." "It isn't." She looked at him in disbelief. "It isn't? I've been both wealthy and homeless." He looked toward the dark street. "Only one of those taught me who truly cared whether I woke up the next morning." She didn't interrupt. He continued quietly. "When people recognized my name," he paused, "they often loved what I could give them. And now they don't recognize my name." He looked at her. "So I finally know who sees me." Amelia lowered her eyes. "I didn't. I know. I thought you were a homeless man?" She nodded. "You weren't wrong." She looked confused. Daniel smiled faintly. "I was homeless. You still are, for now." "No." She shook her head. "You've never really been homeless." He frowned. She looked around the old church. "You made this place feel safe." Then she placed her hand gently over her heart. "And somehow, you've made this feel like home too." Daniel couldn't remember the last time words had stolen his voice. He simply looked at her. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic music, only two lonely people realizing that somewhere along the way, neither of them had been walking alone anymore. Across town, Martha was busy. The dining room table had disappeared beneath piles of old documents, insurance papers, property records, newspaper clippings, family photographs. Vanessa watched impatiently. "What exactly are we looking for?" "Anything. Anything. Something that gives Amelia leverage." "There isn't anything." "There has to be." Martha refused to believe luck alone had placed Amelia beside one of the richest men in America. Then Chloe unfolded a faded newspaper. "Mom," Martha looked over. "What?" There was an article. She read aloud. "Local businessman Daniel Blackwood donates anonymously to community library expansion." Martha's eyes narrowed. "The library?" She smiled slowly. "That's where they met." Vanessa frowned. "So?" Martha tapped the newspaper. "People believe in coincidence. I don't." Her mind was already constructing a story, one convincing enough to poison trust. The next morning, Harold arrived at the church carrying 2 garment bags. Daniel sighed the moment he saw them. "No. You have a charity gala tonight." "I declined." "They declined your decline." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "I don't belong there anymore." Harold smiled. The children attending that fundraiser would disagree. Daniel became quiet. He hated public events, but he had never refused children. Harold looked toward Amelia, and perhaps, he smiled gently, you could both attend. Daniel glanced at Amelia. She immediately shook her head. "Oh no, why not? I don't even own proper shoes." Harold chuckled. "I anticipated that." He handed her the second garment bag. Inside was a simple navy blue evening dress. Elegant, beautiful, nothing flashy. Amelia's eyes widened. "I can't accept this. It's a loan. It costs too much. It belonged to my late wife." Harold's voice softened. "She would have wanted someone kind to wear it." Amelia carefully touched the fabric. "I'll return it." "I know." That evening the ballroom sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers. Guests turned as Daniel entered. But this time, they weren't staring at him. They were staring at Amelia. The simple elegance of the dress couldn't compete with the quiet grace she carried herself with. She looked nervous. Daniel leaned closer. "You look frightened." "I am." "So am I." She blinked. "You? I've spoken before presidents, and I'd rather face them again." She laughed. His shoulders visibly relaxed. "There." He smiled. "I usually smile around you." Neither realized what they had admitted until several seconds later. Both looked away. Both smiled even more. The evening passed quietly. Daniel spoke with employees. Former scholarship recipients hugged him. Children from hospitals he had funded ran across the ballroom to greet him. Amelia watched each interaction. Not once did he seek attention. Every conversation ended with him asking about someone else's family, someone else's dreams, someone else's health. She finally understood why those employees had applauded him. His fortune hadn't made him extraordinary. His heart had. Then Martha arrived. She wasn't invited. But wealth had taught her one useful skill. Confidence opened many doors. Vanessa and Chloe followed close behind. Harold immediately recognized trouble. What are they doing here? Daniel turned. His expression cooled instantly. Martha approached with tears already forming. Daniel? He said nothing. I've been looking everywhere. Still nothing. She dabbed at imaginary tears. I have something difficult to tell you. Amelia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Martha reached into her purse and produced several photographs. Old library pictures. Pictures of Amelia shelving books, talking to Mrs. Dawson, standing outside when Daniel first appeared. I didn't want to believe it. Daniel quietly accepted the envelope. Martha lowered her voice. Amelia knew exactly who you were before she ever spoke to you. Amelia's face went white. What? Martha continued. She volunteered at the library because she knew you donated there. No, she recognized your name. That's not true. She planned everything. Guests nearby began listening. Vanessa stepped forward. We tried to stop her. Chloe lowered her eyes as though ashamed. We told her manipulating lonely people was wrong. Amelia stared at them in disbelief. Every word. A lie. Daniel slowly looked toward Amelia, not accusingly, not angrily, simply waiting. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. How could she prove something that had never happened? Tears filled her eyes. I didn't know. Martha shook her head dramatically. Daniel, she sighed, you're a good man. Good people are the easiest to deceive. The ballroom became unbearably quiet. Harold took one step forward. I think that's enough. But Daniel gently raised a hand. No. He looked at Martha. Are you finished? She smiled inwardly. She believed she had won. Then Daniel asked one question. Just one. If Amelia planned all of this, he held up the photographs. Why did you sell her for $180? The room froze. Every guest turned toward Martha. The tears disappeared from her face. For the first time that evening, she had no answer. Before she could invent one, another voice echoed across the ballroom. I can answer that. Every head turned toward the entrance. Mrs. Dawson stood there. Beside her, a man in a dark suit carried a thin folder. Inside it were notarized documents, video recordings, bank transfers, and one piece of evidence that would not only destroy Martha's lies, it would expose a secret Amelia's own late father had died trying to protect. Mrs. Dawson looked directly at Daniel before speaking the words that left everyone breathless. Amelia was never supposed to lose everything, because legally, none of it ever belonged to Martha in the first place. Mrs. Dawson's words hung over the ballroom like the silence before a storm. No one reached for a drink. No one whispered. Even the musicians had stopped playing. Martha's confident smile vanished. What are you talking about? She demanded, though the tremble in her voice betrayed her. Mrs. Dawson nodded to the attorney beside her. He stepped forward and placed a leather folder on the nearest table. My name is Richard Hayes, he said calmly. I was the attorney for the late Thomas Carter. Amelia's heart skipped. Her father's name hadn't been spoken aloud in years. Martha folded her arms. My husband died years ago. He did. So whatever this is, it changes nothing. Mr. Hayes looked directly at her. It changes everything. He opened the folder and carefully removed a sealed envelope. The day Thomas Carter learned his illness was terminal, he came to my office. Amelia's breathing became shallow. He was worried. Mr. Hayes glanced at her. Not about dying. He was worried about his daughter. Mrs. Dawson quietly took Amelia's hand. Mr. Hayes continued. Thomas established a trust. Martha laughed nervously. Impossible. It is very possible. He never mentioned it. He intentionally didn't. The room grew even quieter. He instructed me to keep it sealed until Amelia reached 25 years of age, or until evidence emerged that her inheritance had been unlawfully withheld. Martha's face turned pale. Mr. Hayes broke the seal. Thomas left Amelia the family home, the surrounding land, several investment accounts, and a substantial life insurance policy. Gasps echoed around the ballroom. Amelia couldn't move. She could barely breathe. I inherited the house? Mr. Hayes smiled kindly. You always did. She looked toward Martha. Then why? She couldn't finish the question. Mr. Hayes answered it for her. Because the trust documents disappeared before probate. Daniel's eyes narrowed. They were stolen. Mr. Hayes nodded once. We believed so. Martha stepped backward. You're lying. I wish I were. He reached into the folder again. But 3 weeks ago, an anonymous package arrived at my office. He held up a small flash drive. It contained copies of bank records, forged signatures, and security footage from a storage facility. Martha's knees weakened. No. Mr. Hayes looked at her steadily. It appears someone removed the original documents shortly after Thomas's funeral. Vanessa stared at her mother. Mom? Chloe's voice shook. You told us Dad left nothing. Martha didn't answer. She couldn't. The evidence spoke louder than she ever could. Daniel quietly looked at Amelia. Tears streamed down her face, not because of the money, not because of the house, but because, after years of believing her father had abandoned her with nothing, she finally knew the truth. He never had. Even after death, he had tried to protect her. The ballroom doors opened once more. 2 detectives entered. One approached Mr. Hayes. We received your call. He nodded toward the folder. Everything you need is here. The detective turned to Martha. Martha Ellis? She instinctively stepped back. You'll need to come with us. This is ridiculous. You're being investigated for fraud, theft, document forgery, financial abuse, and unlawful coercion. I didn't. The detective raised a hand. You'll have an opportunity to speak at the station. Vanessa began crying. Mom? Chloe looked completely lost. As officers escorted Martha away, she twisted around and shouted toward Amelia. I gave you a roof over your head. Amelia looked at her quietly. No. She shook her head. My father did. Martha opened her mouth again. No words came. For the first time in years, she had nothing left to control. The ballroom doors closed behind her, and with them, so did the chapter that had defined Amelia's life. Months later, Martha pleaded guilty to fraud, forgery, theft, and the unlawful concealment of Amelia's inheritance. The court ordered her to return every asset and dollar she had wrongfully taken. She was sentenced to prison, while Vanessa and Chloe, finally forced to live without their mother's influence, began taking responsibility for their own lives. Amelia chose not to attend the sentencing. She had spent enough years watching Martha control every room she entered. She wasn't about to give her another moment of her peace. Justice had already given Amelia what she wanted most: her freedom. Several days later, the story spread across the country. News outlets focused on the billionaire who had lived among the homeless. Business channels analyzed Blackwood International, but ordinary people talked about something else. The young woman who had shown kindness to a man when she believed he had nothing. Letters poured into the community library. Donations arrived for the church shelter. Volunteers doubled within a month. People who had walked past homeless camps for years suddenly stopped to ask names, to share meals, to listen. Daniel smiled when he heard that. That's worth more than headlines. True to his word, Daniel accepted the role of chairman at Blackwood International, but only on one condition. The board approved every request without argument. The abandoned church would be restored, not demolished. The shelter would become a permanent community center. A literacy program would be funded in honor of Mrs. Dawson. Scholarships would be created for young adults leaving abusive homes. And every employee would receive expanded family assistance and mental health support. Victor resigned before the vote was complete. He quietly sold his shares and disappeared from public life. Daniel didn't celebrate. Bitterness had already stolen too many years. He chose peace instead. As for Amelia, she finally walked through the front door of her childhood home again. The house was empty. Dust covered the furniture. Sunlight poured through the same windows where she had once scrubbed floors before dawn. She slowly walked into her father's study. One photograph still sat on the bookshelf. Her parents, smiling. She picked it up carefully. I'm home, Dad. Her voice cracked. I'm finally home. Behind her, she heard quiet footsteps. Daniel had remained respectfully outside until she invited him in. He stood in the doorway. I wasn't sure if you wanted company. I do. He walked beside her. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Amelia asked, Can I tell you something? Always. I used to pray every night. For what? For someone to rescue me. She smiled through tears. I thought the answer would arrive wearing a nice suit. Daniel chuckled softly. I'm sorry to disappoint you. She laughed. You didn't. She looked at him with eyes full of affection. You came wearing an old coat. He smiled. It was the only one I had. No. She shook her head gently. It was exactly the one I needed. Weeks turned into months. Their lives changed. Some things, however, remained beautifully familiar. Every Thursday, they still visited the library. Every Saturday, they shared lunch with the people at the shelter. Daniel still insisted on fixing broken fences himself whenever he had time. Amelia still believed books could heal hearts. Neither of them allowed wealth to erase the lessons hardship had taught, because they knew how quickly circumstances could change, and how desperately every person needed kindness. One autumn afternoon, Daniel returned to the place where everything had truly begun. The church steps, the same spot where they had once watched the stars together. He reached into his coat, the same velvet box, the one he had carried for months. This time, he opened it. Inside rested a simple diamond ring. Nothing extravagant, just elegant, just honest, much like the love they had built. He looked at Amelia. "I've spent a long time searching for what I lost." She quietly took his hand. "I know, I finally realized." His voice grew softer. "I wasn't meant to replace the past." A tear rolled down Amelia's cheek. "I was meant to build a future." He knelt, not because he was a billionaire, but because he loved her. Amelia, his eyes never left hers. "You gave a broken man a reason to wake up again. You reminded me that home isn't a building, it's a person." He smiled. "Would you spend the rest of your life reminding me?" She didn't hesitate, not even for a heartbeat. "Yes." A joyful laugh escaped both of them as Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger. Around them, applause erupted. Mrs. Dawson wiped away tears. Harold grinned proudly. The little boy Amelia had taught to read shouted louder than anyone else. "They're getting married." Everyone laughed, even Daniel, a laugh that had been missing from his life for far too long. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories. Share this video with someone who believes kindness still matters, and tell us in the comments, what was the biggest lesson you learned from Amelia and Daniel's journey? Years later, when people asked Daniel Blackwood how he had found happiness after losing everything they expected him to mention, success, wealth, or second chances, he always gave the same answer. "I found the richest person in my life on the day the world believed I had become the poorest." And perhaps that is the quiet truth life keeps trying to teach us. The value of a person is never measured by the clothes they wear, the house they own, or the money in their bank account. It is measured by the kindness they show when they have nothing to gain, the promises they keep when no one is watching, and the love they choose to give after life has broken their heart. Because sometimes the greatest blessings don't arrive looking like miracles. Sometimes they arrive looking like someone the rest of the world was foolish enough to overlook.